สวัสดีค่ะ Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon from Thailand. Welcome everyone once again to the second day here with ASA Forum of Architect 21. You're still with me, Sarada Shusi. And of course, today our forum takes place from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. on the online platform, variety of channels that you can choose and pick up the best way for you. So first of all, just to remind everyone that you can log on to the website and register by logging on to worldwideweb.asaexpo.org/forum-2021. And if you have logged on since yesterday, you can use the same password to register inside and log on to today as well. And for those, you can also choose Facebook. You can log on to facebook.com/ASA Architect Exposition as well. And last channel, you can log on to YouTube as well and search for ASA channel. The best thing is that if you log on to the website there, on the website, the handout and documents will be available. And apart from that, you can also switch language from Thai and to the original sound of English as well. One more thing is that if there's any questions at all during the sessions, you can also bring it up through our chat box. And at the end of the day, to the last sessions, we'll be having a live Q&A to discuss throughout the topic that had happened on the second day. So please keep that in mind. And for now, let's start for the first topic for today. We are going to talk about new in the existing as heritage, which will be delivered by Mr. Saif Haque, Director Research and Design Program at the Bengal Institute for Architects from Dhaka, Bangladesh. So let's start with our first topic for today.
This is architect Saif Haque. Based in Dhaka, I have an architectural practice of my own and the principal of that practice. And I'm also director of an institute called Bengal Institute, where we do research and design, and we have academic programs also. And I have worked on like a different number of different projects which had social implications, and I have written, I've been involved in teaching, and I have organized exhibitions, I have published. So I had a varied experience so far, and I'm very happy to be participating in this forum. In fact, it's a great honor to be part of this ASA forum, and at the same time, I thank the forum organizers for the invitation to share my thoughts on heritage. Though I'm not a heritage expert, but this topic is of great interest to me. And on occasions, I've also worked on heritage. The painful experience of going through this pandemic and the disruptions caused has brought many restrictions to our lives and many uncertainties. When I received the invitation to this forum, the forecast of a pandemic was nowhere in our radar, and this forum was supposed to take place physically in Bangkok, and now being held a year late and also being hosted virtually from Bangkok. The virtual world was in existence before the pandemic, and now it has become essential to carry out our work and to remain connected. Thailand is an ancient land with a rich cultural heritage, and the city of Bangkok is an important place within this heritage context. Both the country and the city has modernized as well as retained the richness of its heritage. I had the opportunity of visiting Bangkok earlier, but it was a stressful condition, and I will look forward to an opportune moment in future to experience physically the wonderful heritage of both the country and the city of Bangkok. The theme of this year's ASA Forum, Refocus Architecture, Seeing Old Things in New Light, a timely one, no doubt. The need for refocusing on heritage and the way we currently see the old needs review. It must have appeared important for discussion to the organizers of this forum. The task of architects are intertwined with heritage, and as for myself, I've always had considered heritage as an important part of my thinking process. The opportunity of visiting this topic is always a welcome one. Acknowledging the importance, I plan to approach the theme with a slight change by focusing on seeing the new in the old rather than old in the new. I begin this discussion with two assumptions. First assumption is that our overwhelming attention to the new could possibly be a reason for heritage issues getting pushed in the background. The second assumption is that our current way of seeing the heritage needs revision. In testing the validity of these assumptions, this discussion will go through a path of historical retrospection in the context of Bangladesh. This is for the first assumption. And for the second one, the discussion will touch a recent architectural event in the global context where the issues of climate change, inequality, and the recent addition of pandemic are connected. The second part will further examine the demand for new and its relationship to the old. I hope that by the end of the discussion, few possible ways are identified for both specific, local, and also global context. The birth of an individual human being takes place at an existing environment. This environment at birth is an inherited one, and the creations and accumulations taking place during the span of a life of an individual becomes the inheritance for the succeeding generation. The long history of humans tells us the continuity of this process of creations and accumulations. The creations are connected to our day-to-day needs, including buildings and settlements. Many of these creations have survived thousands of years and have become part of our accumulations. After careful scrutiny by individuals, nation-states, and global entities, a selection of these are designated as heritage. This assigning of the heritage status to a selection and their caring are done on the basis of their cultural and economic values by succeeding generations, and of which architects are also a part. On the other hand, the natural world altered by both natural and human actions are passed on from generation to generation. The state of the earth, inherited by an individual human being at birth, becomes an altered one at the time of death. Similar to the creations of humans, the places endeared by humans and critical to the survival of the planet also gets assigned as heritage. We are already in the third decade of the 21st century and living in a world largely shaped by social, political, and economic events of the last few centuries, with Europe and America playing a dominant role. Colonization and industrialization were the two main forces that contributed to this shaping. In addition to the shaping of the physical world, our mental world, including the notion of heritage, was also shaped. That continues to be an influential factor of our thinking process till today. The emergence of large number of newly independent countries at the end of colonial rule in the mid-20th century gave a new political identity to the post-colonial world. A number of these countries chose to maintain link with the former colonizing countries and look for developing cooperation. Additionally, new links were also established that included America, already an influential country of the world. Europe and America were looked as models of social, economic, and cultural development. On the other hand, another group of newly independent countries looked towards the communist and the socialist countries as models of development. And that resulted in a world divided into a capitalist and a socialist one. And finally, these two worlds merged with the end of the Cold War in the 80s that ushered in the era of globalization, sweeping the world during the last few decades. In the present day South Asia, the subject of heritage as evolved during the colonial period made a transition into the post-colonial period as a colonial legacy, receiving a renewed interest in light of independence. Bangladesh also shares this trajectory. Architecture in Bangladesh from the ancient to the modern shows a number of transformations, noticeable in their expression, organization, construction technology, and use. So from 3rd century BC, the monastic establishments to the 20th century institutional buildings, one can observe these changes, these transformations. In the pre-colonial times, despite political and cultural changes, a continuity is observed that implies the influence of the existing was on the new. And these are evident from the historical descriptions, surviving examples, and the scholarly discussions on them. The colonial experience brought a complete change to this practice, and the break is observed. Although an extensive interest in the local heritage by the colonial rulers are observed from individual to the institutional level, but drawing inspiration from them for contemporary productions is less evident. Institutions were established for overseeing historic sites and monuments, and many rules and regulations were established for the protection and conservation. But at the same time, we see a neglect to the traditional architecture and settlements. A duality of viewing heritage was thus established. In the last 7 decades, since the end of the colonial rule, much of the colonial practice have undergone significant transformation, but further work is required for their updating in the current and future needs. The post-colonial beginning required establishment of institutions for offering architectural education. And Bangladesh, with an architectural tradition that can be traced to 3rd century BC, saw the establishment of an architecture school in early 1960s, which was established with the assistance of the United States government. And the curriculum was modeled after the architectural education in the US. The component of local history and tradition fell short for obvious reasons that needed the efforts of few decades to fulfill this gap. Bangladesh at the moment has nearly 25 schools of architecture. This brings us to the mention of a architectural society that was established in the 1980s under the leadership of the architect Mazhar Islam. And this society undertook an extensive survey of architectural heritage sites all over the country and produced a collection of basic drawings that materialized in an exhibition and the book in the late 90s. It was almost a work of 10 years that took the society to about 100 different places of the country and preparing this measured drawings. During the last 2 decades, various institutions, both public and private, have carried out significant documentation of the built heritage, producing substantial materials for study and preservation works. The issue of heritage has gained importance in education, practice, and in discourses at different public and private institutions and forums. The progress towards the development, let me show you, this is the cover of the book that got published out of this documentation that was done in the 80s and 90s by the Society of Gentlemen. The progress towards the development of awareness regarding heritage and its preservation has no doubt made significant progress and is evident for the work that has been done. Listing and protection measures have improved, and quite a few examples of restoration and conservation works are already there. Despite the progress, there is a continuation of an apathy towards heritage. And this is quite evident when we see wanton destruction of built and natural heritage in an economically driven development agenda. The coexistence of the old and the new is yet to be fully appreciated, and at times choices are presented as either this or that, not both. The campaign for safeguarding the mangrove forest of Sundarban, a World Heritage Site, from the construction of a power plant in close proximity, met with little success. In a much recent development taking place from the end of last year, the architects and the members of the civil society have been carrying out a campaign to save from demolition two prominent modern architectural heritages located in Haque, the main railway station and the Dhaka University Teachers and Students Center. The campaign so far has not yielded much success. In conclusion to this first part of my discussion, it can be said that the advancement of work related to heritage since the end of colonial period now faces the challenge of development, and that calls for further work covering broader grounds. Now, moving into the second part of my discussion, to see heritage from a global context and in the light of sustainability, climate change, and inequality. I'm beginning this part by making a reference to this year's Pritzker Prize. Every year, architects around the world await the announcement of the winner of this prestigious Pritzker Architecture Prize. This eagerly awaited event not only names the winner, but along with this, the announcement also communicates to architects and others as well an important message on the current thinking in architecture. The choice of the duo Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal carries a message for a climate change and inequality challenged world, further aggravated by the pandemic. Of the reasons mentioned in the award citation, one is their attention to the existing building and readily available materials that I find quite relevant for this discussion on heritage. Adaptive reuse has been in practice for quite some time, but it was mostly applicable to buildings assigned with a heritage status. But here, with the work of Lacaton and Russell, we are offered with the option of taking reuse further into the existing building stock. The existing stock is not expected to be uniform everywhere. Rather, it will be different on their accounting, assessment, categorization needs to be done accordingly. This will offer the basis for their reuse. So if we look that instead of demolishing existing buildings and not very old, very recent buildings, we can continue to keep these buildings in use and without doing new structures, we can reduce the impact of carbon emission, and also we can offer this existing resources to people who need them most. So in that way, we can curtail our demand for new. And if we look at the building types and stock, we find a rich variety all over the world. In view of challenges related to the issue of sustainability, climate change and social inequality, the consideration of including everything existing, human-made or natural, does not only provide a viable option for facing the challenges, but also can increase the scope of seeing heritage in a much broader scope and beyond the conventional view of only listed sites or buildings. I'm aware that within the current scope, there are plenty to take care of. And with an expanded scope, it will get further loaded. At the same time, if we want to put an end to the wanton destruction of the human-made and the natural in making room for the new, this expanded scope is justified. The demand for the new arises from a variety of reasons, and without a careful scrutiny of the demands and their impacts on the existing, there is a possibility that we may end up causing greater harm and then getting benefited. To maintain the equilibrium of the Earth system, this is of great importance. The idea here is not to downplay the role of the new, but to put emphasis on the need for a critical examination of the demand for new and the resulting consequence on the existing. Let me show you this map of Bangladesh that shows the areas that have the possibility of going underwater due to global warming and climate change. So we already know that Bangladesh is a small country in terms of land area with a huge population, and one can imagine the impact of the climate change on this small area. So this area is not only the existing settlements and lands are going to be affected, but also there are many important heritage sites. And there are two important world heritages located within this area that is going to go under water because of global warming. This year's Pritzker Prize winners selection is an important pointer towards taking action. Architects, whether directly linked to heritage or not, have an important role to play in this expanded scope being discussed. This expanded scope will have much complexities and requires detailing that can be undertaken with the involvement of various other disciplines covering not only scientific and artistic aspects, but also aspects of finance, implementation, institutions, and the legalities. Now, moving into the new in the whole. Talking about new in a discussion of heritage might not be a comfortable fit, but considering the impact of the new on the old, this could be relevant. The production of the new is an age-old tradition, and the new comes from the demands of improvement, novelty, emerging needs, and most importantly, due to increase in population. As long as demands are there, human society will be needing new buildings, new cities, new parks, new interiors, and new products. And at the same time, we'll also be needing retrofitting, renovation, conservation, and preservation of the existing. My interest in discussion of the new is more in relation to making decision, constructing, and using the new rather than the appreciation of the new as an object. This interest arises out of the concern about the environmental emergencies we face today. Architectural engagements, whether for the new or old, not only requires ingenuity, but also involves finance, materials, and site. To elaborate the impact of the new on old and the issues of sustainability and climate change, I will now discuss briefly about materials and site. It is now well established that building and infrastructure construction contributes a substantial amount of greenhouse gas emissions, a major cause of climate change. The consumption of raw materials for the manufacturing of construction materials are also depleting scarce resources. Though the main responsibility of reforming the current production practices lie with the industry, but the role of architects are also important. Architects, by adopting a policy of enhancing the life of existing and sustainable construction materials and technology, can make valuable contribution in the effort towards a sustainable future. From materials, I go to site. Similar to materials, sites also have an important role in a sustainable future of the planet. Sites, as they exist in particular locations, are handed and taken over in the process of inheritance for their onward existence. Sites, with all attributes present, specific, general, cultural, and natural, have the potentials of influencing the engagement that can result in a unique work of architecture. Sites and heritage have also played an important role in the production of new works. The decision related to the use of particular site needs to be carefully taken in consideration of the subsequent changes the use will bring. All now required is an extension of this role by establishing a harmonious relationship between the new and the old. The harmonious existence of the new and the old can be a model for the sustainable environment of future. This discussion so far establishes the need for refocusing on heritage, and one possible way of doing that is going beyond the current scope of including everything existing before deciding about the new in the whole. This view, as mentioned before, emerges from the consideration of emergencies faced by the planet. And this could be an important aspect of the new light that the organizers of this forum has referred in the theme of this forum. The opportunity of imagining a future overcoming the challenges facing the planet will require identification of strategies and charting of pathways to desired future. To work out these strategies and pathways, a comprehensive understanding of the existing is required. An exhaustive inventory of data of the planet and the identification of their interrelationships is fundamental to the understanding of the existing. This understanding can be the basis for the introduction of the new in the old and the management of the sustainable environment of the future on the basis of this understanding. If we look closely at our natural and the man-made world, we will find that there exists a very delicate balance. And if we are not careful about maintaining this balance, we put ourselves, future of this planet, in danger. So we need to approach whether it is heritage, old things, or new things, we need to take a new approach, a revision of the existing practice, and we need to develop a much better understanding than the way we approach at the moment. In one of our recent projects, an experimental school that was set in a floodplain of Bangladesh, we took a similar approach, but with modest means. It was an attempt to see how one can delicately, sensitively intervene in landscapes, in terrains where the environmental aspects are very crucial to the survival of the planet. So I may not have talked much about heritage buildings in my presentation, but this broad view, this offers me a possible way into the future that also includes heritage. Thank you so much for your attention.
And for now, the next sessions, ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor to welcome our distinguished Thai speakers from two companies here. Starting from the first one, our Thai speakers from PAVA Architects from Bangkok, Thailand. We're meeting up with the founders of PAVA, which are Ms. Pacharapan Ratananakorn, coming along with Mr. Warat Limwiboon. And also joining in these sessions, we also have the co-founder of Shma Company Limited, joining us with Mr. Namchai Sansupha. So all of them together, they will be sharing in the topic of nature, people, local, my estate 1955. So as always, if there are any questions at all, please feel free to bring it up through our chat box. And of course, at the end of today's session, we'll be having a live Q&A sessions for all of you to bring up the questions and discuss all of the topics from today together. So let's enjoy the next session together.
Hi everybody, before we going to have a lecture, let us introduce ourselves first.
We are PAVA Architects. I am Pacharapan.
I'm Warat Limwiboon.
Let me introduce myself first. I studied Bachelor of Architecture in Interior Architecture at Chulalongkorn University. After graduation, I worked with Architect Kitty as architect and interior architect profession in Thailand. Later, I went to study master degree in urban design at ETH Zurich. After graduation, we start PAVA Architects in 2018.
We studied the same undergrad school. I studied architecture from Chulalongkorn University, first class honor. And then I have a chance to work with Architect 49 for a few years. And then I moved to study abroad for master degree, landscape architecture, Harvard Graduate School of Design, Harvard University. And then I have a chance to work with big Haque in Gale and then come back to open the office with Tris today. Okay, let's start the lecture now.
Okay. Firstly, we have to say thank you, ASA, for inviting us to be part of the forum this year. It's an our honor to be here and tell the story of Gaomai Estate 1955. This project is an adaptive reuse of the 66 years old tobacco drying estate in Tung Siau community of San Patong, Chiang Mai. Our office called PAVA Architects. PAVA in Thai means state of being. We try to understand the states and the real values of every project we work on.
I think before we going to talk about this project in very detail, I would like to have this chance to talk about our design philosophy and our design standpoint. So I think PAVA do believe in the critical practice of architecture and design. And what is the critical practice of the design? It means that the design need to represent multi-dimension of the context, not only of the form, space, and order of the architecture, but we need to represent the invisible layer of environment, politics, economics, and culture, and so on. And this picture is very important for us. From the top level, we see the beautiful symbiosis between architecture and the landscape. But it's impossible for us for deciding everything from the bird's eye view. So from this level, we need to land ourselves down to the middle level to see people over there looking at the signage. You see the repetition of the architectural order. You see the band typology of 6 meter by 6 meter and the gap of 6 meter. But it's not enough for us. We need to land ourselves on the ground condition. We have to feel the wetness. We have to see the sky. We have to see the dirt. We have to see the thing that living together as a holistic system of the design. So that is our position.
So we work with many stakeholders and professions to ensure that this conservation project is going on a holistic approach and a sustainable way. The UNESCO Asia Pacific Award also gives us morale and endorse us that Gaomai Estate is an inspired model for rescuing and repurposing an overlooked and disappearing industrial typology by combining a commitment to conservation with a contemporary design aesthetic. Thanks to the owner family that keep this heritage intact until nowadays, especially Jakcha Sathiragun, who initiated this project. Thanks to Gau Mai team for helping us on the research, assistance, and all coordination. Thanks to our friends Pachala and Supawadi for helping us initiate the tree and building conservation method, especially for this project. Thanks to our team, PAVA team, for the new and old design in heritage context. Most importantly, everyone here, even more than on this list. This is Chiang Mai from above in 1988. This is the location of Gau Mai Estate, and this is the inner city of Chiang Mai. We can see here most areas were in greenery. This is Chiang Mai nowadays. The urban development has transformed Chiang Mai from the center of the city, expanding to the arterial highways, encroaching on the small villages, including Tung Siêu community. Gau Mai Estate aims to conserve the coexistence between the architectural and natural heritage intact, creating the heritage oasis in this area that contain more than 100 species of plants and more than 50 species of birds and wildlife in the middle of the new development surrounding them. We have to start with the history of the tobacco, which is so important for this project. Tobacco has been in Thai people life for longer than 7th century. It was around 1930 when the Virginia breed of tobacco was introduced in Thailand. To counter the influx of the imported tobacco, resulted in the quick spread of the tobacco farming and the processing barns in the northern part of Thailand. Gau Mai Estate legacy started at that time in 1955 to serve as a tobacco drying industry of the Tung Siêu community. At the beginning it's called Mapping Yasu, later changed to Tung Siêu Farm. This area contained 50 tobacco drying barns and lasts until 1992. After the barn stopped processing, the tree conservation has started because of the owner's business and his passion in biodiversity. Later, in 1997, tourism has started booming in Chiang Mai. So the Gau Mai Lana Resort started at that time to adapt the 18 tobacco drying barn into resort to serve hospitality industry. Later in 2016, the project Gau Mai Estate 1955 started to transform the other 15 tobacco drying barns into museum and many kinds of recreational spaces to serve the historical and ecological tourism. This is a trade house photo in the site in the past, where hundreds of workers, hundreds of farmers and buyers gather in day and night to make a living from tobacco drying business. This turned this area into the socio-economic center of the community. This old photo shows how this estate operated in the past. They combined the tobacco leaf with the tobacco drying stick. Then they put them into the barn and climbing up to hang them on the walls and heat them by heat radiation from the fuel pipe on the lower parts. There are 3 generations of tobacco drying barn in this estate. The first generation, the wall made of rattle and dove, because it's so easy to find this kind of material at that area. The next generation, the wall are made of bricks. We can see here there are different heights of the barns depending on the demands of the tobacco drying leaf at that time. If the demand increased, the volume can be expanded. Until nowadays, we can still see the trace of the gable here to show that that barn used to be a small one. This is the last generation of the tobacco drying barn. The wall made of concrete blocks. The wall materials of the barns had changed over time because of the availability of the material and construction technique at that time. After the end of the tobacco industry, most of the building turned to be warehouse to store equipment in the plantation period. Some barns turned to be resort, covered with the climbing plants as our memorable image when thinking of Gao Mai. Some barns are abandoned and dilapidated. On the structure and walls are cracking and flaking by aging and weathering. This image, these charming, beautiful barns coexisting with the big tree that cover this barn with the big canopy still remain in our memories. This is our impressive photo in the past. We impressed by the rich nature that lives together with the tobacco drying barns in the different ages. We realize this mutual combination is the core value of this area, and the symbiosis between the big trees and barns are the real sense and spirit of this place.
Okay, before I talking about the master plan, I want to tell a story. The first time that we visited site so many years ago, we walked through the site with the client. We see so many things happening on site. We hear the sound of the wind, we hear the sound of the bird, we see the beauty coexistence of architecture, landscape, and animals. And suddenly the client asks us, okay, PAVA, which building that we need to transform and adapt to be a Gao Mai museum? I think that is very good and interesting question. We pause and we think, but we overwhelmed by this holistic system and beauty of the site. So we answered to the client that it's not just the only single building that need to be a museum, but the whole site need to be a museum. The site at a museum is our idea to approach all of the educational program on this site. So we decide to step back a little bit to draw and map the representation drawing here. That this drawing is represent the true scale of the building and the tree height. We understand the relationship between the tree and the building. We notice some of the open spaces. We see all the activities, and then we come to analyze all of the information and detail on site. Starting from the first diagram on your left-hand side here, you see the brown color is mean the high point condition. This high point condition is very dry, it's very suitable for the conservation area. On the other hand, the water basically flow from the high point and going down to the low point here to the street. So that means that the land is going to be sloped like this. We found out many low point condition. The low point condition is like a valley that can contain the rainwater. So we have an idea to suggest to have a farming area and wild preservation area. And because of that topographical analysis and hydrological analysis, we start to divide the program of the new master plan here. On the high point is the conservation area. These open spaces and low point condition is suitable for the farming. Here is the wild preservation area. There's so many species of plant happening here. The area that sit next to the street is going to be the parking lot and services area here, surrounded by the Gao Mai Hotel and Resort. It's kind of challenging situation that very super private program are sit in the middle of the public program. So we kind of create like a big roof of circulation on the right-hand diagram that this public circulation surrounded the private program in the middle. And we kind of minimize the parking footprint. We want to minimize the accessibility of the car here, but we are aware that we need to design the circulation for all generation of people, from young generation to elderly and to the disabled people. That means this big loop of circulation provided the golf cart circulation that all people can access all the program. Besides this big loop circulation, we promote bike lane and the pathway, the pedestrian, that we want people to walk on the site and see the beauty of the symbiosis of architecture and landscape. So the next diagram, we record and analyze all the existing tree condition. You can see the big canopy of tree here contrast with the small canopy of tree. We start to understand the history, the multi-decade of the tree, tamarind tree, very beautiful, very powerful rain tree here beside the Gamai area resort. So we start to understand that the tree performs itself as a landmark that links many programs together. It's very critical for us. The next diagram is talking about the structural, existing structural building condition. From the gray color that we need to preserve, the yellow pale color we need to adapt it, reuse, and the orange color we need to introduce a new design because of the context that is so different from each other. And the last diagram is talking about the directional signage system on site. It's talking about outdoor landscape furniture. It's talking about the lighting design system because we want people to see the museum, not only one single building, but all the whole site. So walkable way, pathway, pedestrian way, bike lane, and all of the lighting and signage system need to integrate it as a one single system.
After a series of the surveys and research with our consultant, we proposed a subtle design intervention into this estate. We do not demolish any barns. We preserve all the healthy big trees to remain and keep the spirit of this place and continue to pass on to the next generation. This is the elevation of every barn on this site. We set the different degrees of design intervention into each barn on a case-by-case basis. For example, if the barns are in fair condition, we preserve it as it is and we just clean and repair some small parts. If they are so decayed and dilapidated, we have to restore them and replicate some missing parts as original. Most importantly, we respect the specificity and the authenticity of every barn in terms of dimension, in terms of the volume, form, in terms of function, and the repetitive planning typology here. This is the collage that show the past and the present of Gao Mai. In the past, this area was a dry land because of the heat radiation from the barns. And the barns look like this, is so distinctive in terms of its form and function. And there is also a small well here to contain water for heat reduction. When they want to cool down the barn after drying process, they use this water. After the barn stop processing, the trees start growing by naturally seeded and human planted. Every original barns are preserved and some barns were added by the new design of the dark gray steel to strengthen the existing reinforced concrete structure and to differentiate the new and old conditions. For the preservation part, we work with our building conservation consultant Supawadi to survey the existing condition and set the different degrees of design intervention toward each barn. Fortunately, most of the buildings are in fair condition thanks to its location on the high point and thanks to the tree density surrounding them that help protect this building against the strong winds. However, if they have some cracking or flaking part or leak part on the roof, they need to be repaired. This is an example of the minimum intervention into the barn. We respect the originality of the barn by preserving the 6 by 6 meter size barns on the plan, and we preserve its volume with the gable roof on top. we reinstall the original feature here. That is the furnace, the small door, the tobacco hanging stick, and the metal fuel pipe here. This is the real photo of that drawing, that we preserve all of the original elements and coexist with the big trees. We can see here the real furnace, the fuel pipe here, and the small well. Inside the barn, we restore every single original element inside to show the mechanism of this tobacco drying barn in the past. This one is a metal fuel pipe here on the lower part, and we also reinstall the tobacco hanging stick on top. A number of these sticks show us that there are lots of demand for tobacco drying leaf in the past. This volume was so dark in the past. When we want to open to the public to learn about this space, we install the new lighting design to illuminate the authentic space and exhibit them to the public. We also replicate the small door as original. Every voice in the barns we preserve as original, starting with the fresh air inlet part on the lower part of the barn. This is the observation window that we cover with the expanded metal and anchor steel to prevent the animal entry. On the walls, we preserve all the small holes here because it's quite fascinating for us and show how the tobacco hanging sticks hang on the wall. For the floor material, we use gravel to allow water absorption. We already installed the new elements of the drainage system around the barns to prevent the damp penetration into the barn. This is the last generation of the tobacco drying estate. The wall made of concrete blocks. We still keep the trace as it is. This is the trace of the original furnace. At the beginning, it was semicollar shape because it served firewood fuel. Later, when they changed into lignite fuel, they changed into a square one. For the craftsmanship on the site, a number of the former workers and artisans were invited to reunite in this place. They gave us advice and detailed information about the history of the site, about the local construction techniques. For example, for this decade, rattle and dowel wall, we replaced them with the original bamboo weaving technique and with the local plaster formula. After interview with the former owner and the former worker, we got a lot of useful information to restore this place. And of course, for the uniqueness scenery like this, that the barn coexists with the rich nature, we definitely maintain. To pass on this legacy to the next generation, we designed the descriptive signs and the exhibition panels both inside and outside the barn to tell the story and the history of each barn and to show the construction technique we use in each building. Most importantly, the rows of the tobacco drying barns in different ages along the historic routes exhibit itself as the real witnesses and evidence of times. From our adaptive reuse strategy, this is the minimum design intervention to preserve the originality, value, and authenticity of tobacco drying barns. To the next level, this diagram shows the minimum to the maximum intervention into the tobacco drying barns. The white parts show that we reuse the original element, and the black part show that we insert the new design from adaptive programs.
Okay, as Trish mentioned before about the degree of design intervention from the minimum on the left-hand side to the maximum design intervention on the right-hand side, I'm gonna talk in detail step by step. Okay, for the first one is the minimum one. We want to preserve and keep the barn typology originality. So the only thing that we reinstall everything that it used to be, like fire furnace, metal pipe, tobacco drying stick. On the next one is Gao Mai Museum. We insert the new structure for the future expansion area. And at the center, we have the 3 meter wide of the exhibition panel. For the library barn, we following the minimum intervention. So we have an idea to integrate the bookshelf and the new design steel structure together in order to minimize the design footprint. The Khao barn is another interesting design that we utilize the existing concrete brick and flipping it up to be a canopy of this building. For T-barn, we sunken to humble connect all the ground condition together, and we have upper level to connect another F&B experience on the other level. For the resort, I'm gonna talk in detail later, but we want to keep the memorable facade outside and reshuffle and redesign interior a little bit. For the trade house, it's all about the connectivity. We want to connect between Gao Mai Hotel and Gao Mai Estate together. So we introduce a new flexible space that allow people to come to have a fun activity together. So here is the first one, Gao Mai Museums. The existing condition is very fair. The structure is quite good. And when we walking into the inside of the building, we are shocked and very stunned by the powerful of the volume. We see the light penetration from the wall here that come into the space. It looks so amazing, and we want to keep this spirit of the place. So we talk with the structural engineers and the client. Okay, we want to keep this space, the same of the space. So we just remove the roof and we insert the steel structure one by one here. And after finish the installation, you can see the existing volume with the new I-beam dark gray steel structure. All the side is the same, the brick is the same, the roof structure, the timber roof structure is the same thing as well. We replace the roof back. We want to show the people the differentiation between the new dark gray color and the existing one. Okay, people walk in and can know that, okay, this is the old one, this is the new one. We want to highlight the new and old condition. And when we walk through the space, we see the frontal exhibition panel. We keep the appreciation of the darkness on top and very light condition on the ground. We keep all the void, we keep the penetration of light. This exhibition panel is 3 meters wide in order to help people understand what's going on the Gao Mai Estate 1955. The diagram talking about the chronological timeline from what happening in the past and what happening right now. Here is another angle that's seeing the exhibition panel. We keep the air inlet here, the existing one, the void for the tobacco hanging stick, the observation that people need to look inside the activity that happening in the past here. I think this picture is very important for us. Like when you stand at night outside of the building, you see the light in contrast to the daytime. It penetrates from the inside to the outside. It's kind of important to remind people what's happening in the past. Like when the drying process happened, the light from that process come out the building. And I think this is very, very, very crucial for people to understand the history of it. The next degree of intervention is the Gao Gao Barn. It's another retail and commercial program. We accept the reality that we have to connect and we have to open the void, open the view for people. It's not used to drying the tobacco anymore. It's used for the public program. So we start to look at the existing condition, and many people appreciate the brick typology, but we think that this concrete brick is also very nice as well. So we come up with the design to flipping this existing wall up to be the canopy to connect the trade house here, Khao Barn, and the cafe at the back of us. The spiral circulation is kind of minimize the vertical footprint of the design as well. The next is the T-barn, is our ongoing design process, and it's now constructing right now on site. The T-barn position is very critical. It's located next to the Gao Mai Cafe, Amphitheater, and the Gao Mai Avenue. So we kind of introduce the subtle sunken space that connect all the ground condition together. And we have the upper level that, okay, we maximize, we increase the capacity of retail program. And ultimately, we have the sky bridge that connect the cafe to the T-barn and the future expansion phase. Here is the on-site ongoing construction process. Here he is Kunin, he is our brave contractor that helped us so many times during so many years. He set up the scaffolding right now, and we discussed with him so many times that and found out the condition of the structure is not quite good for the public program. So we start to use the reconstruction technique that we measure everything from the column, the beam, the size of the brick, the gap of the mortar, and we ask him to remove a set of brick down and label everything in order to use this set of brick and reinstall, reconstruct everything as it used to be, but fit to the future program of the retail area. Here is the section perspective. You can see the humble sunken here that connects the people from the amphitheater and the Gao Mai Avenue at the back. You can see that this sunken technique is kind of highlight the essential volume of the T-barn here. We introduce very small intervention of the lighting design here. We use the existing brick at the facade of the building. Here on the upper level is the increase the capacity of the retail. This one is contrast to the Gao Mai Museum that we introduced the dark gray color of the steel with the existing brick. But here we want to have a subtle contrast of the very raw of the brick surface, brick texture contrast with the new. It's not kind of modern, it's kind of more smoother. It's kind of the contrast of the texture of the materiality here. And it's kind of nice to have a feeling of drinking tea and feeling the ground condition as well. Here is the Gao Mai Resort. We have 2 degrees of intervention, but both of them we try to preserve the memorable vertical green. And the first degree of intervention, we just introduce the experience of the tobacco drying barn. But on the other side, we kind of utilize the maximum space of the building. We integrate all of the M&E, the mechanical engineer, the sanitary system, the electrical system within the bathroom as a one single core to minimize the M&E footprint. And we maximize the room area and link this room together to gain the experience of the full height of the tobacco drying barn. Here is the memorable picture. When people talking about Gao Mai, I can guarantee that people thinking about this image of the coexistence between the vertical green contrast with the very small wall opening here. I think it's kind of nice. We want to keep it, but on the other hand, inside is totally change the atmosphere. The lightness become the darkness. We want to keep the sense of the darkness. We bring the wall of the tobacco drying stick back to let the light from the sunlight come inside a little bit. But the exposed brick here will contrast with the experience of the bathing in the granite bathtub here. And the final of the design intervention is the biggest one. As Trish mentioned before, this trade house is a place for socio-economic center of the community. People come here selling the tobacco leaf, people buying tobacco leaf. We want to bring that sense back. But as a new terms of the program, we want to create a flexible space that have a multi-level of the activities here. The location is very important. It sits in between the Gao Mai Hotel here, and at the back is the Gao Mai Estate here. It's kind of center point that link every program together. We keep the existing timber structure, very open space here, open plan, have adaptable partition, adjustable ceiling, and the solar panel on the top. We think this location is very critical because this roof open to the sunlight. It's you can see from the first slide that there are a few of the roof that open to the clear sunlight. So this is the opportunity to have some of the sustainable design that can generate the electricity to support and sustain the whole Gao Mai projects here.
Gao Mai Estate aims to revitalize this abandoned area and want to resume the roles of being the center of this community again by providing the visitor with a series of the sustainable tourism program and recruit the local employments. We can see here there are many educational and recreational programs that we design to attract the local and visitor to come, such as the art workshop, music and cuisine. These things aim to remind the visitor and locals about their cultural roots. Also would like to raise the awareness of the human and nature relationships. In these spaces, they can contain many kinds of activity, such as the local farmer market that promote the local products, even the many kinds of cultural ceremony that can happen among their natural setting and among their architectural heritage under the big shades of the trees.
I think this picture is very important. It tells so many stories. It's the multi-decade rain tree that sits next to the Gao Mai Hotel and Resort. And this tree is very healthy. It represents the owner vision that all the sizable tree, except the unhealthy one, we cannot cut it out at all. He's passionate about the tree. It's very the real thing that we need to tackle on. And because of that vision, we will have a very nice symbiosis between the tropical climate, tropical vegetation, and the architecture. Not only for the first generation of barn, but all the site happen at the same time. Like the coexistence of this atmosphere is very important, and it represents the spirit of the place. It turned itself to be the memorable picture that, okay, when we think about Gao Mai, it's the tree for sure, it's the building for sure, it's the sound of the animal for sure. And in order to maintain that healthy ecosystem, thanks to our friend Pachara, that we invent the primary and secondary tree survey and assessment.
For the primary survey and assessments, we focus on the physical health of the tree as like we can perceive from their appearance, and we focus on their value, that it can be a local representative of the site or it can be a landmark of the site. For the second survey and assessment, we focus on the physical health of the tree also, but more in detail, and focus on the surrounding target impact that the tree can cause.
Yeah, after we knowing like what type of this species of tree it is, we know the height of the tree, we know the canopy, we know the health condition of the tree, so we record and label everything on the diagram here. You can see the number here that indicate the status of the tree, and that link to the table that Trish previous show in the past slide. And then we have to use this chance to thank to Dr. Kongkanda and Kun Jirapon and other botanists to help us like record, survey, and label all the tree. As we mentioned before, that this project is talking about the site as a museum. We don't want to limit the educational program inside the one single building. So this is very important, the exhibition object that are popular that surround the site. And we have to thank to the owner for the very huge effort to maintain the tree. Here is the arboriculture technique that we use and maintain the tree, not only from the crown raising technique, directional pruning, thinning technique, in order to make the tree to stabilize itself. We don't want to use the steel bracing structure to the tree in order to make it stable, but we kind of use the tree itself to balance itself, because that steel bracing technique gonna destroy the memorial space of the place. As a result, we get a very good, very healthy ecosystem here, architecture, tree, and many things. So because of that, we are not surprised at all that we found out 100 of healthy plant species and more than 50 species of birds and wildlife. Thanks to our specialist survey team and Thai Bird Conservation Society of Thailand that help us check and record all information here. And we are so happy and very surprised that we found out the white Ramchama bird, which is the indicator of the good, healthy woodland ecology here.
So for the last part, this building designed by Tree Architect and Gotchawan. It was an only twin barns in this site, and the designer changed the concrete block wall into the transparent glass walls to connect the historic route with the new amphitheater. We designed the exhibition inside as a summary of the exhibition routes and as a summary of the timeline of this project. Next would be Shma design for the new landscape in Gao Mai Estate 1955. Lastly, we have to say thank you for everyone who helping us shape this project, and thank for ASA again for this great opportunity.
Thank you.
My name is Namchai Sansupa. I am the director of Shma Company Limited and Shma SON, which was responsibility for landscape design of the Gao Mai Estate 1995 project. Gao Mai has been well known for quite a long time for its green facade building hotels, which was turned from the tobacco curing barns into the hotel for more than 20 years ago. And it has been a famous photo spot for a long time. And the second generation of owner, he wanted to utilize for this popularity by adding the new functions of the unused space at the back of the hotel, which you can see from the plan here that the green area was the area of the current hotel, and the brown area at the back, which comprises of the old curing barns, were not utilized and was abandoned somewhat. The photo spot is here, the connection between the hotels and this trading building, the tobacco trading building, and the new owner, the son generation, he wanted to build a cafe here, which was facing the main open space of the project. And at the same time, he had an idea that he wanted to create the new attractions to attract more people. At first, when we were contacted by this client, he said that he wanted to build a maze at the back area so as to draw more people to the project. So anyway, I think it is quite a good idea, and we would like to check out the space and see how it was. And we did some research online and found out that some of the people said that the place is haunted. So anyway, we went to the site visit, and this is what we saw. This is the area at the back of the site, which comprises of two generations of the curing barns. The first one is the bamboo weaving together with plaster. And the second generation is the brick, which majority of the existing structures now, and part of them was turned into the hotel a long time ago. And the third generation, the newest generation, was made from the concrete block. For example, this one. The one in the picture here is a special one because it is the only structure in the compound that was the double space, the two curing barns combined into one. And the client will turn this structure into the cafe. This is the photo of the cafe facing the open space. There are some big trees here. This unused space that was occasionally used as the car park when is an big event for the hotel. As we were designing the landscape, the cafe was construction was ongoing, and this is the photo that we took during some of the site visits. And not only the curing barn that is existing on the site, one of the very interesting building is the trading building, the big light structure roof, which were used for trading in the past, but now it is unused and became the storage of the collectibles by the client's owner. Anyway, the structure, the facings, the combination of the facade was very interesting. As you can see in the photo here, it's made from the old doors and windows. But not only the building, I think the traces of time, for example, the coexistence of building and trees are very interesting also. But in this photo, you can clearly see the problem of the site. You see that at the base of the building, it became green and dark, which was the result of the moisture on the ground that was seepage into the building. So the solution for this is quite simple. We added the cut-off drain to prevent further damage. And this is the overall of the second generation rows of curing barns made from brick. We thought that the building and the space itself, it's in a very good combinations, and we didn't want to change much. We didn't want to touch hard on anything. So just to make it more functional, make it more usable and durable. For example, the walkway, the existing one was just the compact soil. So we propose just the granite chips and concrete. We select them for the reason for their durability and also their muted colors, just to differentiate old from new. The top row is the old materials, and the below one is the new ones. So this is the after picture of the alley walkway. You will see that the building and the new trees are kept there. The new walkway was inserted, but more or less everything looks almost the same. Not only the building that was valuable in terms of history and time and age, but the trees in the site has all the history as well. It gives the atmosphere and the sense of place to the projects, and also it has a very close relationship to our clients. For example, a growth of the teak trees here were planted by the new owner when he was very young. You can see him in the photo as well. And around the project, the father of the owner, he has been planting trees for more than 30 years. So scattered around the project were the handsome various types of big trees, giving shades and traces of time. The tamarind trees, which obviously is much older than 30 years now. And again, not only the built structure or the tree itself, but I think what is most valuable here is the space between those buildings and trees, which is not easy to find nowadays space. And also again, the famous photo spots. So what we propose to the client is that the maze, which is at the back of the site, and it is next to a very old and deteriorated buildings. So we propose that those areas should be kept for the next phases, but the focus should be on the central area where the cafe was to be built, and which is now being used as the overflow car park, as you can see at the red area in the center. And these red lines here are the roads that were used for service, together with the walkway, and also some earth walkway at the back in the dark line here. What we propose is that we, first thing is we want to create the experience of the new visitors, that they will be walking through the different eras of curing barns before they arrive at the cafe. As you can see that at the car park on the top, and then you walk down to the cafe, and then you enter to this central area, which we think that what is needed here is the orientation points, because the area is big, and the focus area will be like somewhat in the middle, and then the path, the walkway, and the direction of circulation will be scattered around. So one big major space is needed, not only for orientations, but also for the multi-purpose use. And also we propose to minimize the vehicular access. The red area is limited to this outside space, and then inside will be only the pedestrian are allowed. So this is the new proposed plan. You will see that the white box, number 10, which is the trading house, and number 5 was the previously the car park was turned into a flat ground amphitheater. We flattened the land to make it usable, and surrounded by this simple amphitheater just to mark it, to make it visible from surroundings, and then to make it as the central meeting point, as you can see from the aerial photo here. And this central space would act as the orientation spot. Either you go to the photo spot next to the Green Hotel, or you walk to the other walkways that is passing by the different areas of the building. You will always remember this big space and come back to it. So this is the process that we designed. We think that this facade of the old trading house is very good, and it can be a very good backdrop for the events here. So we propose to keep it, flatten the ground, lower it a little bit, so that when you are down there, you look up and look around, and you look at the big trees, you look at the different buildings, and found yourself in the center of the space. And it proved that quite practical, so to say, for the multi-purpose use. This is the photo before the construction, during construction, and after completion. All the trees are kept, and a few numbers of new trees are planted. The use during the holidays, it became very popular. And at the night time, it can become space for movie or for banquets. or even just like something big, open, green, calm to look at from the cafe or from the hotel. We still keep some of the undeveloped old curing barns and provide the adventurous path and walkway if you like to have some adventures and feel maybe a little bit thrill and spooky in this old area. We still keep it as it is, just to clean it up, make it safe for people to go there. And I'm sure that those old curing barns are waiting to be utilized and to be given life once again. I think that with minimal approach, minimal intervention, we try to keep everything, the building, the trees, the space, the atmosphere, and keep it as it is, and do as little as possible so that it became like the unpainted canvas for people to go there, to use to enjoy themselves, and obviously to take selfies, which is quite a successful spot for people to come. More and more people are coming to the place, so much as that the cafe itself was overwhelmed. At first, when the client want to utilize the selfie business here, he charged the money for people to come into the place just to take photos. And they will pay for the ticket at the entrance point, and they will get a coupon for the drinks at the cafe. But at one point that more people were coming, that the cafe itself couldn't cope with the numbers of the people. The client made a very bold move that he said that he will open this space to be the public, privately owned public space for people to come here freely. And not only that, but some of the weekends and holidays, the local markets were set up for the communities to come here and to trade their craft without charging any money. But again, that in the future, the client has more plan. Think with its popularity and become more well known. Started from the cafe and museums that PAVA architect has designed. The client are planning for more restaurants, workshop space, even the chocolate shop to be located in those old curing barns. It has got many good reviews from the selfie and from the young people who go there and enjoy the space. But one of the best review that we received is from the mother who children took her there, and she said that she only enjoyed the open space and the quietness. And I think the selfie business may come and go, but the space itself and the value of the building and the trees that will be bigger, more mature, and more valuable as time passes will prevail. Thank you. I have the small little video that I'd like to share with you as the conclusion of my presentation today.
How is everyone doing right now as we are now moving on to the last sessions for today? As I mentioned earlier that in the last session we are going to bring up all the Q&A that everyone has sent through our chat box, that we are going to have a live Q&A session. But apart from that, most important that in this session, we also have a special guest that would join us as well. So in this round, we also have the honor to welcome our moderator in these sessions as well. So I would like to take a short minute here and introduce our moderator for the last session on the live Q&A and meeting up with our special guests. So ladies and gentlemen, here in this session, our moderator is Dr. Montira Unagun from UNESCO Bangkok. She works as a programmist within the Asia-Pacific region and related to the safeguarding and sustainable development of cultural heritage. And with the focus of World Heritage here, she has authored and edited publications related to heritage management, urbanism, and sustainable tourism. So today, we are very welcome to have the honor for Dr. Montira to do the moderator in the last sessions for the Q&A session and also leading everyone to meet with our special guest for today. สวัสดีค่ะ Dr. Montira.
Sawadika, thank you very much for the kind introduction. So I'd like to now move us into the final session of this last two very interesting days that we have been exchanging on the theme of Refocus Heritage in the New Normal. And so the talks so far have been focused on the issue of heritage, the role of heritage in our contemporary society. And so now for our last panel discussion, I would like us to link us to the second part of the theme, which is new normal. And so this is a reality that has been facing us now for almost 2 years. And so it's an opportunity to reflect with some of the leading practitioners that we have from around the Asia-Pacific region, and also our special guest, Dr. Mario Santana, Secretary General of ICOMOS. So at this point in time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Mario Santana, who will be sharing with us some thoughts about the pandemic and its impact on cultural heritage, as well as design profession. He himself is trained as an architect as well, and one of the leading specialists looking at issues of documentation and so forth related to heritage work. After that, we'll open the floor to our different speakers from yesterday and today, looking at some of the reflections on their own work, but from a larger perspective in the national context or the Asia-Pacific context or the global context about where we need to go from here, given the lessons learned from the last 2 years. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor to Dr. Santana for him to get us started. Over to you, Mario.
Thank you, Montira, and thank you for this very kind invitation to share some ideas of my work in ICOMOS and also on my professional life, and also a person that has been really impacted by the pandemic in different aspects. And I think that there is a lot of ground to cover, and I'm very happy to be part of this panel this morning. I'm connecting from Ottawa in Canada. It's a little earlier here than it is in Bangkok, but I'm very, very happy to share. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to throw out some ideas there. And I hope that these ideas will serve the panel for the further discussions and exchanges that we're going to have. So I wear two hats, let's say, in this presentation. So one is as an educator. I am a professor at Carleton University in Canada, teaching engineers and architects about conservation of historic places. And I am the Secretary General of the International Council of Monuments and Sites, which is one of the largest non-for-profit organization, professional organization, dealing with issues of the conservation and also an official advisory body to the UNESCO World Heritage Convention. So when we talk about, heritage under threat, what we imagined before the pandemic is certainly, destruction by conflict or looting, or climate change impacting sites and then destroying this very important historic fabric, or earthquakes and abandonment of these sites. But who would have imagined 2 years ago that we would have a pandemic and that this pandemic would have different impacts to our heritage? And there has been an unprecedented impact, specifically because of the lockdowns that prevent people to enjoy the sites. So tourism, Montira was talking before we joined the session about this, but also the fact of monitoring the sites and conserving the sites, being able to be there when something is happening. So basically, throughout the pandemic, we saw about 90% of World Heritage sites partially or completely closed, according to UNESCO. And this had different effects on the entire world. Not only the lockdown, but also the affectation of the livelihood of local communities because of lack of income, because of the visitors and other aspects. So we see in the pandemic that we have, even now with the rollout of vaccines, we see a strong inequality in how things are going. So here in Canada, we're quite well. We have more or less 70% of the population have got their first dose, and it seems like we're getting out of this lockdown gradually. But what about other countries? So I think that this is a local problem and with a global dimension. And I am speaking from my experience as a person working in the international sphere as a Secretary General, that we see a lot of inequalities on how things are happening. Now, COVID has given us a lot of opportunities to reflect, and I think that basically governments have mobilized millions of dollars to develop the vaccines, collaborations using virtual means. I think that this year I have had more ICOMOS meetings than I ever had throughout my 25 years as a member of the organization. And it's been a lot of hard work. I have to say that being in the board of ICOMOS, we have met at least 10 times this year, while we only met twice a year. But also, we have seen that many heritage organizations have moved to the digital world. So they have digitized their assets, so they can provide this kind of remote access to sites, virtual visits, guided tours using the internet, and then breaking time zones so we can connect with anyone, anytime. I mean, who would imagine I will be connecting from Canada, talking to Bangkok at this time of the day? Now we seek a kind of gradual reopening. So how can digital technologies actually improve this risk reduction while access is limited? How can we guarantee? Maybe we have to think about new approaches in which the digital approach complements the physical approach. And then we might not need to, just go there to the site and enjoy everything. Maybe we have to, I think that Montira was saying this before the event started, we have to rethink how the strategies can work. And also when we talk about heritage organizations, I was thinking that many people are working from home, but in many organizations it was difficult because most of the digital assets, the assets in which they base their work are not digitized. So, for instance, documents, etc. So I think that the pandemic has shown us a lot of issues. But what about this sustainability? So, I mean, sustainability using virtual visits, it could be challenged. I mean, of course, connecting through the computer to see a site is probably, I don't need to travel there. I don't need to spend CO2 to go to this place and visit. But I'm also using some computer power. I have actually a colleague who's doing a study about people working from home compared to people working in their offices. And they have realized that the consumption of energy is very similar because the buildings are still being heated, are still air conditioned. As we are not there, but they are still being maintained. So I think that this calls for a big shift in architecture. How are we going to design places where when we're working from home, maybe those places are shut down and then we don't need to consume energy there. And then also meetings, for instance, I don't think that ICOMOS can go to the past. We cannot have only physical meetings. We need to have virtual meetings. We need to be more inclusive because the organization was a little bit exclusive because people that travel were able to travel, were able to pay, were the ones who were able to meet. So now that we have the virtual means, maybe we can call all these important meetings of the organization using virtual tools. Now, technology has advanced a lot. We were talking about documentation, with your phone, you have access to taking notes, you are connected to the web, you have a camera. There are many interactions that you can conduct with a smartphone. So I think that this is also another revolution that we're going to see in the future. So I think that with this, I'm going to conclude. Montira asked me to mention these two things. So impacts of the pandemic as a wake-up call for our heritage and design work, and the importance of heritage and design in finding fresh opportunities to recover from the pandemic in a more sustainable manner through digital transformation, more collaborative approaches, greener and more socially conscious design. And I think that these aspects are very important, but we also have to understand that even though we have a more digital transformation, this digital transformation also requires energy. So I think that it goes both ways. We have to think how the digital can complement the physical, but how the physical needs to change so there will be not that much energy consumption. So with this, Montira, going back to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Mario for sharing with us some of the thoughts and reflections that have been coming out of the global processes, particularly driven by ICOMOS, sort of the premier heritage platform working on professional heritage management. And so now we come back to our speakers. We're very happy to have with us, this full range of expertise coming from the Pacific, from Australia, from South Asia, from Bangladesh, from here in Southeast Asia. We have speakers joining us from Malaysia, and of course here from our home country, Thailand, but also from East Asia, represented by Mr. Yu, coming from Korea as well. And so within this broad spectrum across the Asia-Pacific region, which has been very hard hit, and particularly in the last few months, has seen really catastrophic numbers, as well as knock-on effects with economy, social factors, and environmental factors as well. We would like to invite some of our speakers from the last 2 days to reflect on, what has been your greatest wake-up call over the past 2 years from the pandemic, as it's affected your heritage work or your design work, or whether you've seen that it's affected the situation in your country or the region as a whole. And so we'd first like to throw the question to PAVA Architects, followed by Mr. Yu, and then ending up with Mr. Croker from Australia. So please, PAVA.
For sure, during the pandemic, these crises slowed down everything, and for the heritage also, some heritage they have been abandoned, but because of the visitor decrease, for sure, and occurring the functional obsolescence. So in this heritage that have been abandoned or underused, we think the strategy that can help in this situation can be adaptive reuse strategy. For sure, we have to maintain them in some way during this time, but for some heritage that have a possibility to adapt, we can use this strategy because it helps mitigate this obsolescence. For example, when we reuse the structure, we can expand the life cycle of the materials and construction. This would be a way to sustain these heritage. And not only the landmark of the building, we should concern and consider about the hood, the open space surrounding them, the surrounding greenery space. For sure, we know when we live in those kinds of spaces, it's quite generous to live there, to stroll around. For example, it's quite comfortable to live in. And I think not only the heritage area, but in our daily life, in our building, we can reuse many kinds of things that to make our space livable and comfortable. For example, I would say nowadays we see the examples of the existing building convert into something that useful for our life. We can see the healthcare facility that insert into the existing heritage. We see the hotel that convert into the temporary use of the hospital, or in Thailand we call hospital.
And even the school, dormitory, and even convention hall, like normally we held the ASA forum in the convention hall in Haque, Mueang Thong Thani every year. And then this year, that area turned to be like a field hospital to serve and to deal with this crisis in the bigger scale.
Yeah, I do agree with Tris, and I think that the main challenge that we cannot predict the future anymore. The situation is so unstable for this week and next week. We cannot sure that what's going to happen next week. I think in terms of design that we are facing right now, we need to think about the flexibility and thinking about the design program that is very hybridized and very adaptable. We think about the big space and it can change itself or change adaptive reuse itself to be another program. So I think that resiliency and adaptability, I think is the main thing that we need to think carefully at this time.
Thank you very much for those reflections. I think I was struck watching the presentations this afternoon. Yesterday we saw a lot of beautiful buildings, beautiful interiors, as well as the city context. And today we saw a lot of greenery, both from Saif's presentation as well as the PAVA and Shma presentations about how the context beyond our built context or our social context, but also the importance of the ecological context as kind of a main decider in the sustainability of our buildings and our society. So with those initial thoughts about resilience, now we turn over to Mr. Yu from Korea. What has been your big wake-up call in your practice or the larger context in the last year?
The biggest hit of a pandemic caused by the coronavirus is ban and restriction on travel and meeting. This painful situation has been going on for 2 years, but it will be set free someday with the vaccination and the development of treatment. It's really pain for mankind, but it is also good time for precious rest and regeneration for the earth and natural heritage, which have been suffered severe due to the human beings. Before the pandemic, in the meantime, if we have focused on visiting the site or museum and taking a look around. But after the pandemic, we can receive more in-depth information through video or material prepared by experts or curators through internet, the media during the pandemic. In addition, there is an advantage that many people can watch at the same time without directly visiting the site in a distance place. I think these changes are good things that we could get through the coronavirus, the pandemic. On the other hand, using the new computer technology, just as mentioned by Mario, such as virtual reality and augmented reality, to reproduce the monument and heritage, using them to understand the public is a good way. Yesterday presentation, I showed the one case of the Gongpyeong Historic Site Museum. It was opened 2 years ago. During the promoting the urban redevelopment project in downtown Seoul, a large number of relics from 400 to 300 years ago were excavated. All the relics were preserved at original location, and we made the museum on that. And a new building with the size of the 30 floor was built on the museum. It takes a lot of time and effort and financial resources to verify and restore the alleyways in the 16th century. But we just preserve at the original form when it was excavated, and by using the computer technology such as virtual reality and augmented reality to reproduce the building and the street of the 16th centuries, time and resources have been saved, and many people have made easy access through the internet. And on the one hand, it is possible to restore while conducting the research. On the other hand, to shape and update using this new computer technology is one of the good ways.
Thank you very much to Mr. Yu. I think we've all experienced personally how the last 2 years has really accelerated digital transformation. A lot of the technology was there, but we didn't embrace it before. But now it's become not only useful, but in fact critical as a way of coping and allowing us to learn about places, interact with places, but also to design and to preserve places in a, wouldn't say more effective way, but certainly gives us another option. And so now we turn over to Mr. Croker for your reflections on.
Okay. One of the things that became obvious to me and our practice was that in working with old buildings, we find that we have buildings which have been built with traditional technologies using natural ventilation, cross-ventilation, access to sunlight. And we are increasingly in our practice and in our modern buildings relying on artificial air supplies, artificial light, all of these things. And with the nature of the transmission of the COVID virus through an aerosol, that has really highlighted the weakness in that whole system. And I have long argued that where we have existing buildings that have existing windows that are operable, we should maintain those as operable windows and not seal them up so that they cannot be used for natural ventilation should the occupant choose to do that. Frequently we are instructed by mechanical consultants to seal the building so that an air conditioning system can be made more efficient. And I have often argued that that is not the right approach. And for me, this whole COVID situation has confirmed that I think that's the right path. Traditional buildings were built without reliance on artificial sources of energy, and they had to rely on the qualities of materials, the nature of their design, their orientation, all of those things. And they had a relationship to the outside which made them healthy buildings. They had a relationship to the trees. And that presentation by PAVA architects really showed how beautiful that can be accommodated and incorporated into a complex to great benefit for everybody, including the buildings. And I think we really need to go back and look at that. And if we are in situations like the Opera House Auditoria, where we have to rely on artificial light, we have to rely on air conditioning, then I think we need to explore technologies that allow us to clean the air of viruses in a sustainable manner, not with more rapid air changes, but to find some technology that makes this work, because I think this will not be the last pandemic that we get, and it's something we need to look at for the future.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think that has been a struggle in many places in dealing with the nature of transmission, and then how to cope with being in indoor spaces with relatively low air transfer rates and so forth. And so, in fact, some of the traditional or historic designs actually are providing us with clues and guidelines of how to allow that to happen. And so being able to bring that knowledge back into retrofitting now contemporary buildings and how they operate, I think is a real lesson that we can learn from our heritage know-how. And so, based on some of these reflections, and we've heard a number of keywords from our first three colleagues, whether it's resilience, adaptability of program and adaptability of spaces, the role of digital technology for learning, for practice, for design, for conservation, but also sort of traditional know-how and how that actually maybe promotes a better environment for a more healthy existence. Have been some of the keywords. So now I'd like to turn over to our second round of colleagues to reflect upon, based on some of these thoughts and some of these realizations over the last 2 years. We've talked a lot about the importance of heritage plus design and how that becomes the pathway towards sustainability. And as you know, the definition of sustainability is based on 3 pillars. So it's planet, or environmental concerns, it's people and their well-being, and then it's also ultimately prosperity. And so now we'd like to invite our remaining colleagues to share with us some reflections about how we need to re-gear our work and our practice, but also our mindset in order to achieve this true version of sustainability in the long term. And so we'll start off with Saif Haque, who spoke very compellingly about understanding the larger basis for ecological sustainability, not just within the footprint of a building or a project, but you showed us maps of the entire Bangladesh or the entire Sundarbans region, and understanding that whole ecosystem as a driver for growth. There's also a question that comes to you from the audience about the importance of an evidence-based approach. You talked about the role of documentation that has been carried out, in this case, for heritage buildings in Bangladesh, but your other work showed us also the importance of scientific evidence and gathering all of that as the basis for sound decision-making and sound design. Can you talk a little bit about what we really mean in terms of sustainability vis-a-vis planet?
Thank you, Montira. I'm very happy that when you were grouping the sessions, I was in this session with PAVA architects, because you had sent the recordings. I had seen bits and pieces of the recording. I mean, and then yesterday I saw Alan's work. I missed Lowe's work, and I also saw a bit of Yu's work. I mean, the feel of being in a conference, like the old times, the pre-pandemic days. I mean, I wanted to experience that in a virtual platform. We have been participating in a few of these, but that I mean, you go for the coffee break, or you go out and light up a smoke or something. I mean, you can do it in virtual things, but I don't think that the virtual will replace the physical, at least to me, not yet. And I'm being not fully versed in the virtual world. I still enjoy the physical world, and I really would love to get out and travel. Talking about the pandemic, how it has disrupted, how it has affected our lives, I think that it is same for all of us, and then it is different for all of us, because of our context, where we are, what kind of capabilities we have about facing this pandemic. I mean, we cannot have a very generalized view of how a pandemic has affected the people all over the world. I mean, how the health facilities are, what are our research capabilities, all these things come into picture. So what really has made this pandemic more aware of, the issues? One is very important, which I often talk about, is the connection between things. The connection between people, humans, and rest of the system. We are just a part of the big system. We, through our knowledge, we've been able to achieve fantastic things. We have conquered the world. We've been to the topmost peak, the deepest of the waters and everything, but yet this tiny little virus, which we cannot see now, has created such a disruption that we found ourselves totally helpless. So this is the essence of this planet, that we do know a lot, but yet we don't know much. But we at least know that there is a connection. When such a pandemic breaks out, it doesn't remain within national boundaries. It might have originated in some place, yes, and look how fast it traveled. And even today, a year gone by, we are seeing the various types of mutations happening and new variants coming. We're not feeling at all comfortable with the vaccine coming into scene. We thought that, okay, once the vaccine comes, you get this magic shot and you are back to your normal life. So that is one part, of this wake-up call. But the other wake-up call, which has been ringing for quite a while, about the fragile nature of this connection, because of all this sort of things that we have been doing to the planet. The reason the planet started warming up, it didn't start warming up on its own, but it was because of the human-induced action. What humans have been doing, that just simply, the scientists have established that. And that took us a while to accept. We have been. So I think that the reason I was talking about this, looking at it in a very broader way of things, is that unless we have a better understanding of the planetary system, whatever we do, if we are, our interventions need to take into consideration. And you're absolutely right. I appreciate your observation that on one hand, we have been documenting things, which our ancestors have built. We wanted to have a good record. We wanted to draw inspirations from them. But at the same time, what exists now? What is the condition of the surface of the planet? All the data, all the information, and that will equip us to sort of deal with our future needs in a much more intelligent, responsible way. So that is, I think, something that I'd like to share again in this conversation. So there is this word that I have been using lately. Last year, I was asked to write an article for a magazine, and the editor asked me, what next? How do you see the future, of because of this? So in response to what next, my answer, that was a thing about architecture. I said that architecture of equity. We need to see things in a much more broader perspective, rather than only seeing within national boundaries or some group boundaries. We need to expand this view of ourselves on the planet. Yes, we have drawn up these national boundaries, we are countries, we are sovereigns, but we have to go beyond that. We have to go beyond that, and we have to go beyond this idea of also competitions. That we have this ranking, which is the most developed country, which is the least developed country. Why do we need to carry on with this kind of ranking? Why can't we all be that we have the same level of development? When we talk about digital connectivity, here in Bangladesh, I don't think that we can right away switch to a digital mode of operation. We still have that kind of limitations. So we need to bring all our resources to our table, and then we see that how best we can share them and how we can maintain this connection between each other. It's fantastic. We are meeting up people from different places. This conference has brought us together. So we can continue to do this. This is something I would like to emphasize, that how we consume the resources that this planet has given us. It has given us plenty, enough. And we can definitely find out ways how we can equitably share this resource. And we can work together for a better future, and we can really build up a world of equity. That's what I believe and I hope. And I think PAVA architects have again shown us that how one can continue living in the future without really getting rid of the past. You can bring it to your future living also. Excellent. Thank you. That's what I needed to say.
Thank you very much to Saif. I think it's really we're facing a planetary call for survival. So on the issue of equity, which you brought up and also Mario brought up in his earlier talk as well, that we now pass the baton to Kunam Chai, talk about sort of equity issues as being really important for social survival and design work.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, I totally agree with Saif that we need to share our resources, not only among humans, but other life forms as well, because we are all living in the same ecosystem. The pandemics occurred to me how important it is to be able to access to the public space, especially in the congested place like Bangkok. This pandemic betrays or reveals all the inequalities in our society, and I think being able to access to the public space is one of them. And we all know that the pandemic hit harder on the poorer communities and populations who usually live in a very high density surroundings. But again, at the same time, they were hit harder, but in the end, the impact will go back to other people in the same society as well. So there's no other way that we can continue living without integration and sharings. For example, I go back to the public space. When the first and second wave hit and the parks were closed, we were forced to go out and being outdoor and exercise on the street. And we know how badly we need those spaces to be in good condition and good quality, and we wish that it were more green. Bangkok is one of the cities that has very limited open space per populations. If by number is less than 6 square meters of the land per one person. But when we look from above, the green and the open spaces are not that limited, but it's just not accessible by most people. The land divided. I mean, the government land were divided and given to different authorities and organizations, and they're fenced up. Even those land are not used or utilized. And for the public sector, they're also like fenced up, closed up, and they call it exclusive or privilege. And they hired landscape architect to design amazing, beautiful landscape just for selected few who can buy their properties. So we also realized that Bangkok is in like very close proximity to the sea. As Dr. Crocker said earlier, that when the lockdown taking place, you can hear the sound of the birds singing around you. Here in Bangkok, I can feel the breeze, the sea breeze, and which makes me realize that, oh, Bangkok is so close to the sea that we didn't realize before because of the sound of the cars and the fumes and the air pollutions and so on. So how about we need to stay back and look at how we can integrate all those land, all those public space and open space and resource to be shared by all the people and animals and other life form. How can we introduce the tax benefits to the private sector so that they can open up their unused land for people to access for recreation or food production, even for the period of time, maybe like a couple of years before they develop those land. How can we integrate the working method and the communications among the government authorities so that they can open part of their land for public use? How can we like convert the drainage canal, not only for drainage, but for other like natures and for people to go in and use it as the recreational space? I think, but first of all, we need to like change our mindset and like being realized, being aware, and got that strongest wake-up call that we cannot continue living on like this. We need to, for example, unmold some of the lawn in the public park so that some insects can flourish and some birds can have their more food in there. And how about those beautiful landscaped condominiums? At least they can open their fence, or at least they can like, instead of making it solid, but make it more transparent so that poorer people who use the street can look through and enjoy their beautiful garden. Not only for like access to be there, but maybe just visual to see some greens. I think that will also like help their mind. So I think we need to look at like all around things, other life form, other people, and realize that we cannot be separated. We are in this same situation, and the situation is even more and more challenging.
Thank you very much, to Kun Namchai for talking to us about really the right to the city and the right to space, not only for humans, but also for all our fellow life forms as well. And I think that's really a holistic view about how we need to move forward. And then finally, on the issue of prosperity, how do we need to consider changing our design and heritage practice in order to be able to achieve prosperity beyond just dollars, but maybe in a more well-rounded way? Lauren, hello.
Thank you, Montira. I didn't expect to have to speak about prosperity, but I guess I'll meet the challenge, I hope. Okay. Well, prosperity has to be linked to the other 4 P's, right? We cannot do without peace, planet, people, and partnerships, right? So let me look at the relationships. I think the first immediate relationship is the personal versus the planet, and the personal versus people, right? Because explanation. So the second one is people relate to partnerships in this aspect, and I'm very keen to talk about that, right? So on the personal level, right, the work from home paradigm has helped the world to fast forward global transformation, right, in the evolution of communities in all its forms. We work in groups and have access to resource people at a touch of a button, as we are now. We organize workshops as opposed to one-to-ones, right, as a mode of operations, which actually results in collective problem solving and breaking down of silos. Right? We have learned how to be inclusive and consultative as a given, and even my most reserved colleagues have learned how to express themselves and take ownership of ideas. All these are human qualities and skills which result in molding mindsets to be in line with sustainable approaches. Okay, so that's on the personal level. Oops. Lost my space, right? People and the planet, right? We talk a lot about climate change, right? And actually in this area of sustainable development, which is what our focus is, right? Pivot and to survive and to find new economies to invest in, and at the same time be responsible. There's actually, somebody mentioned recently, US 3 trillion available for sustainability. Right? So if you think of that, if we learn how to pivot and connect with work that we right? And it's up to us as designers to decide where we want to engage. There's a lot of work for us to do without having to sacrifice our principles. And I think that is the important thing, right? The other relationship I always think about is natural sustainability and biodiversity in relation to cultural sustainability. We think along those same lines. And now more than ever, we have to learn how to connect those two baselines adequately and efficiently and convert it into sustainable initiatives, right? And there will be a payback. We can operate on various economic models, but new normal organizations now look at the triple bottom line, to put it simply, right? So you try and link this triple bottom line to the other thing that is now very, very pertinent, which is circular economies, right? It's not a new word. I think we are just learning how to understand its application within the whole of society, within the whole of various infrastructures and systems, right? Whether it's manufacturing, whether it's building now, whether it's about recycling, it's all about that, right? So we have to learn the tool and learn these new tools. As designers and as heritage conservationists, we have to get beyond the skills that we have picked up and learn how to talk about social economies, okay? So that's the other critical part. Pivot and move into this area, and we continue to intensify collaborations, partnerships, and communications, right? We will be able to get beyond this pandemic. And that's my realization, you know. Cultural heritage is actually, right, sustainable. Never been over-concerned about short periods of time. I always take the long view, and I know that within that timeline and the landscape, we will always be able to deliver projects that will answer the brief. And as we do that, it automatically answers the issue of prosperity, which follows the equation. I think I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much to Lawrence. And so your last few words struck me and reminded me of something you had shared with us earlier, maybe some years ago now, that when you work on a project, including a conservation project, you're not looking at what the project will look like at the day that you submit it to the client, but you're looking at what the project is going to be like in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years time. And I think it's important as practitioners and as professionals, whether we're designing a new building or we're restoring an old building, to take the long view. And to take the long view, not only for the sake of that particular building or that particular site, but also how that building and that site fits with society, how it fits with nature, how it contributes to the planet. And only in that way, I think, can we be truly sustainable. And so on that note, I'd like to share a few slides as well. And then after that, I'll turn back to give the last word to Dr. Mario Santana. I'm telling you now, so you have a few minutes to prepare. Okay, so, one second. And so I think we've had a fruitful discussion over the last 2 days, and I think we've talked about how heritage and design practice needs to move towards sustainability and innovation, and that we can't continue just in our usual status quo as before. And Saif shared with us his last slide, which was his project, the Arcadia Education Project, which won the 2019 Aga Khan Award for Architecture. And I wanted to share with you even more pictures of this. And I also wanted to remind you of the quotation that Ellen shared with us from the Australia ICOMOS Borough Charter, which is to change as much as necessary, but as little as possible. And I think in a way this ethic extends beyond conservation work, but it also extends to new design work and our responsibility for us as designers to understand that whatever interventions we make have an impact. They have an impact on the neighborhood, they have an impact on the city, they have an impact on ecology, they have an impact on the planet. And so whatever we do, in a way, needs to be as subtle and as responsible as possible. And this is very much reflected also in the philosophy of the 2021 Pritzker Prize winners that Saif also mentioned. And they have said, use what is there, stay simple, embrace the outdoors, honor light, freedom, and grace. Spend the minimum to get the maximum. And here we have pictures from Saif's project that show us about the beauty of simplicity in materials, but also in being able to maintain ways of life of local people, but also to be able to maintain kind of the way that the surrounding context functions and sort of the ecological systems that are underpinning where we live and where we create our new designs. And so bearing in mind these different scales and these different issues of materiality and ecology and context, I think that helps us move forward into a more sustainable path for the future. And as heritage practitioners, we are facing a really pivotal moment where we are no longer simply working on conserving monuments and conserving archaeological sites. We are now being more open to the issues of living heritage. But more and more, I think the pressures that face us require us to take a sustainability mindset to our work, so that heritage becomes part of sustainable development work, and sustainable development work is only sustainable if we think about what is our heritage, both our natural heritage as well as our cultural heritage. And on this basis, would we be able to then deal with managing crises, to be able to achieve resilience, sustainability, to deliver justice and well-being to society as a whole? And so on the 5 Ps which Lawrence mentioned, which is people, planet, prosperity, but also peace and partnerships, you'll notice that the biggest ring of all, of course, is the biosphere, which is planet. UNESCO has been working along with other organizations in order to think about how do we overcome these challenges. In the short term, of course, we're facing the COVID pandemic. And so UNESCO has done a series of studies looking at heritage, culture, nature, and the pandemic. And there have been a series of recommendations about how to help people overcome the pandemic by building back better, by using digital technologies, by being more prepared for emergencies as well as for response. When we come to the issue of planet, then we begin to take a longer view. It's not just, the next year or 2 years that we need to get through, but it's the next 30, 40, 50 years, the next century, the next 2 centuries that we need to be able to anticipate when we have issues like climate change and how that's going to affect our work as design practitioners, but also as heritage practitioners. We really need to take the long view. And then finally, when we come back to the issue of prosperity, we're faced with the challenges of how do we merge sustainable development with heritage work and with design work. And, this requires, for instance, thinking about how the work that we do can create jobs, livelihoods, meaningful ways that people can create economic prosperity. But it also links back to what Lawrence talked about, which is the circular economy. Heritage design, is the perfect opportunity really for circular economy beyond just recycling a plastic bottle. We're talking now about how do we create meaning and viable uses for entire buildings, for entire neighborhoods, for entire landscapes, for entire cities and metropolitan areas in a way which understands that all the embodied investments and energy that has been put into creating those spaces, and how do we ensure that they're meaningful for the next centuries to come. And so UNESCO has been working on making this connection between heritage, design, and sustainable development. Many of the speakers we have joining us today are actually winners from the UNESCO Asia Pacific Awards for Cultural Heritage Conservation. And in this awards program last year, we introduced a new category, which is special recognition for sustainable development. And this can be awarded either to a project which is a conservation project or a new design project. But in either case, that project has to have a significant impact in contributing to sustainable development. And we think this is the way of the future. It's not enough just to acknowledge good design. It's not just enough to acknowledge good conservation work, but we have to be able to put ourselves to a higher bar, which is to ask the question, and how does our work contribute to sustainable development? And so you can learn more about the Heritage Awards program by scanning that link. And anyone who has projects that are in fact eligible, our deadline has just been extended to the 31st of August this year, and we welcome you to apply. And then finally, I'd like to close with another issue that Lawrence mentioned, which is, given that this is the new reality that is facing us, are we actually equipped as heritage practitioners or as design practitioners to meet these new challenges? And to this effect, UNESCO has developed a new framework for competences, which we call the UNESCO Competence Framework for Cultural Heritage Management, which lays out the kind of universe of skills and knowledge that you need to be able to become a well-rounded practitioner working in this area and working towards a sustainability mindset. And then now I'd like to close with the reflections from our panelists over the last 50 minutes. And some key words that you have shared with us in terms of how we need to move forward in order to achieve sustainability through heritage and through design work. So our colleagues from PAVA talked about the importance of adaptability of programs and spaces, the need to be able to design for resilience. Mr. Yu shared with us the importance about digital technology and transformation for our learning, our design, and our practice. Alan Crooker from Australia reminded us about actually the wisdom that is contained in traditional building know-how and traditional building systems, particularly natural ventilation, natural lighting. Saif emphasized the importance about interconnections across space, but also across different systems that allow us to understand and respond to our planet's vulnerabilities. Kun Namchai eloquently spoke about equity issues and the importance of being able to share resources among humans and other life forms, particularly in public spaces. And then finally, Lawrence encouraged us as practitioners and as professionals to pivot towards long-term sustainability as the bedrock of the work that we do. And so based on this, I would like to turn over the floor to Mario Santana for some final reflections about this long-term perspective about sustainability in our work and to close the session. Mario.
Thank you, Montira, and I feel very honored to be able to close this session after, all the interventions from my colleagues, and I would like to thank you for all your contributions. I think that we have a big responsibility as, architects, educators, people working in intergovernmental organizations such as Montira, but I want to stress the fact that the circular economy is something that we are talking a lot. How can we recycle construction materials? How can we calculate the embodied carbon of existing and historic buildings to reduce the CO2 emissions? And this is all very positive, and also how to use traditional knowledge to, of constructions that are adapted to the climate and how they can teach our modern systems. This is all very important, but I think that we also need to have change in government, because unless it's cheaper to do circular economy rather than to take everything into the waste, into the bin, into the underground, then this is not going to change. To give you an example, I was watching a lecture in New York, in which, New York is a big city where there is a lot of construction waste. And it's actually cheaper just to drive this waste south to another state in the United States, to the landfill, that actually recycle it, And we also see that in Amazon, when you return an item, Amazon destroys this item rather than to resell it. So I think that we have to implement other mechanisms. So I think the partnership with government and communities is really important, because I also watched another presentation about the responsibility of companies in recycling. So if you are not going to recycle, you would have to pay a tax. So that makes recycling cheaper. So we probably need to enforce this kind of tools to be able to generate change. Now, I think that COVID has taught us that we can be very connected using the web and using the internet. I think that Saif clearly mentioned the disparities in the connection of internet, because of course I'm connecting with you from Canada, where we have good internet, but many other parts of the world do not have good internet and they don't have access. So how can we digitize those places, and how can they have access? And then we also have informal economy in many of our countries. So I am originally Venezuelan, and in Venezuela we have informal economy. We cannot work from home. So how can we make those changes? But anyway, I don't want to finish in a negative way. I want to finish in a positive note, because I think that the contributions of our colleagues have been very meaningful. I invite you all to, if you allow me, Montira, I invite you all to join ICOMOS as a Secretary General. I have to say that we have very powerful mechanisms, in particular our working groups. So Montira showed the climate change future of the past report. So we have a very important climate change working group that is working towards many good aspects. And then we have our SDG working group, and that is also working on sustainable development goals, and put heritage on the table for change and sustainability. So with that, I would like to conclude the panel, and thank you so much for your attention, and hope to see you again, either virtually or physically. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Mario, and thank you very much to all of our colleagues for joining us today. I invite our panelists to stay on for the all-important group photo session for a few minutes.
Yes.
And then we also thank the audience coming to us from all corners of the globe for joining us today, and also joining us yesterday, and for your interest and your enthusiasm in all of the proceedings so far. Thank you. And then finally, a big thanks to the ASA team for all of the hard work behind the scenes in pulling off the event.
Thank you very much once again. And now, as Dr. Montira has mentioned, we are going to have a group photo together with all of our distinguished speakers up on the screen. It has been very fruitful information and all the knowledge that they have been sharing with us throughout these 2 days events for ASA Forum 2021. Yes, the best thing I need you to do now, big smile. Did we got that? Okay, one more picture, everyone. Give a big smile. Yes, I actually have a photographer right here in front, but everyone can't see this, but keep on smiling. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. All of those that are watching, our participants from around the world that are watching, give a big round of applause to all of our distinguished speakers, to our moderator, Dr. Montira Unagun as well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, participants from all around the world, this is coming towards the ending for our 2 days of ASA Forum 2021. And I have to say that we are very proud because this is the first time that we have held an online conference like this. Well, we hope that all the information throughout 2 days have brought you all the insight, very fascinating, all the knowledge here, and also opinions that could really hit you in some of the information that could make a change now, because we have to act fast. So on behalf of the Association of Siamese Architects under royal patronage, we would like to really sincerely thank you to all of our participants from around the world. Thank you to all of our guest speakers. Thank you to our moderator for joining us in these 2 days and for your great support. Just to remind everyone that all the handhelds, all the documents would be available on the website. So if you log on to the website, you can go to worldwideweb.asaexpo.com/forum-2021. And for the videos, we'll be having it uploaded through the website as well. So please look forward for the videos after this. And of course, we hope that everyone would stay safe. Be safe here and be healthy, and we hope to see you for the next online conference as well. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. ขอบคุณค่ะ